Good morning, everyone, and I'll be happy today to start the session talking about zero energy buildings. So, to do that, I'm gonna do a short introduction talking about the difference between energy and sustainability. And then I'll go through the explanation with three aspects, three key points that in my opinion are the most important points when we talk about and when we want to design zero energy buildings. So to start, we have to bear in mind this picture all the time. Zero energy buildings, buildings that consume zero energy, are not sustainable buildings per se. What we need to do and what we need to focus on always is the life cycle of the whole design and building process. That life cycle that spans throughout the extraction phase of construction material, goes through the operation phase when we are supposed to consume less and less, and then we go end up to the deconstruction phase. So if we see this under this perspective, we can see that yes, energy is probably the most important impact on the whole life cycle, but it's not the only one. So if we lose contact with all the other aspects, the outcome is clear. We'll be just solving 30% of the problems related to climate change and buildings, forgetting all the other impacts. And this has to be considered all together in the design process. Otherwise, in 10 years, we'll be talking about other issues rather than energy. Maybe we will be talking about zero water buildings or zero waste buildings. Whereas I think we have the opportunity right now to rethink about the whole process of designing and integrate all this aspect all together. Because we're talking about architecture, we're talking about design, so it's not just a sum of parts. It's not just putting together different aspects, but it is rather talking about a system that works all together. Okay, let's go through the zero energy building concept. And I'd like to start with this aspect, comfort, which I think is the most important, the most appealing, the most interesting when we talk to our client, to our end users of our buildings. So comfort is the reason why we consume energy, if we think about it. We turn on electricity, gas, the energy is consumed to establish a comfort that the building is not able to supply itself for its configuration. So I'd like to change a bit the perspective of the thing, right? Rather than talking about reduction, I'd like to talk about some addition of quality. And this goes through understanding people's needs. If we do that, we will produce a building that has this concept integrated into the whole process, from the start to the end of life. And I'd like to go through some example. The way we conceive comfort in buildings through its system, it's basically using and understanding climate and put it in relationship with people, with the users, with the occupants. So playing and understanding, of course, solar radiation, natural ventilation, creating spaces that are able to respond to people's needs thanks to its own configuration and construction. That could be interior spaces, different shapes and form, different architectural expression. We are not binding ourselves to parameters. We're doing the contrary. We're using climate's input to produce new and appealing design. And we can actually have a lot of possibilities, change interior or exterior space into interior space, convert it into a new ecosystem, playing with the knowledge of the climate. So the second point to do this is the integrated design process. If we don't consider all this aspect, all the sustainable aspect, all the environmental impact through the whole design process since the very first beginning, we won't be able to control it and to generate an answer, an integrated answer to our problem that put all the aspects together and conceive a coherent building in all these aspects. Because once again, we're not just focusing on reducing energy. We need to produce and design better buildings. And to do that, it's at utmost importance the quantification of the strategies, passive strategies. We talked about natural ventilation, solar radiation. I'm not going to explain all these strategies individually. Just it's important to understand that rather than talking with just adjectives like cold, fresh buildings, natural ventilated, we also go through it and calculate the impact of each aspect. So we can translate it also into economical cost, into value, into a positive and design strategy for our building. And with that, we have to be creative. We need to use these elements and turn them into a creative experience. Here, I just give you an example where we can read the design process back and forth with these images since the very start and concept of the building, the scheme, the idea on paper, the quantification phase, translate this solar radiation, wind, views, people into data, and then build it up. Like construction engineers. When we design structures, we calculate them, not because we won't be able to keep up a building without calculation. Actually, that we have tons of examples of buildings that don't have structural calculation behind, but they're still up, and they are up for 1,000 years. We need to calculate to optimize and to be the owners of physics of these aspects to better translate them into an appealing and effective and functional design. And once we have those clear, of course, I have to say, to do this, we need to go go on with the design process, putting together science and architecture. So we need to understand the functioning of the building and be able to identify which are the critical aspects for the energy consumption. So understand what we're losing in each room. Every room has a slight different behavior. We have different elements to focus. Here I just put, I don't know, 15 variables. We have many more to understand and focus when we design an energy efficient building. So the way to be precise, the way to be optimal in the design is to draw them, put them down on a chart and assess and evaluate the impact. So I'll be better, I will be able to take more coherent and evidence-based decision for my building, which will translate that into a more cost-effective building, a more efficient building, a building that consumes, not just a building that consumes zero, but that puts together people, comfort, and then the energy consumption will be a second outcome of all the strategy. So the third point is turn all of this into economic value, right? It's really important now, all the focus we have on climate change, but this is not, in my opinion, this is not the way we convince our client. It could be materialistic and vulgar to talk about selling buildings, but it's actually what we're doing, what we have to do to make a change in the building systems, in the construction sector. We need to produce interesting buildings under the economic point of view. And we can do that. We can do that outlining all the positive aspects. We can translate all the information we gather about sustainability during the design process and describe them, put them, and translate them into a valuable thing, and then quantify direct and indirect benefits. And just considering the life cycle of a building will allow us to identify other costs different than the operational cost. Generally, we say that a building can reach up to 2 or 3 times the initial cost during operation and deconstruction and maintenance. So if you're analyzing the whole life cycle, we'll be able to take decisions that are not just based on the first stage of construction, but that will have consequences on the other aspects and the deconstruction and the reuse phase. We are talking now about circular economy. Materials have value, intrinsic value. We put them in a building, and if we consider the building as a bank of material with its passport, when we can track materials and then reconduct them into a market for this specific element, material, whatever, we can keep also the economic value of each piece of our architecture. Of course, real estate value, and this is also quite proven today. I mean, think about all the office buildings that are going to be built in Barcelona and Madrid. There is a news, like it's already old news in a national newspaper, that assess and that states that the new office buildings that will have, all the new office buildings will have an environmental certification like LEED, BREEAM, Verde. And this is, unfortunately, this is not because the stakeholders are so keen into solving climate changes. They might be, but the most important part is that environmental impacts, sustainable aspects of a building increase the comfort of occupants, so the productivity of workers there. The people's commitment to a company, the better, higher satisfaction of workers and people and clients in our building. So this, I think, is the way we need to talk, not the only way, but a way that sometimes we forget when we talk about sustainability. And indirect benefit too. And so I think, I said, oh, thank you very much.
Any questions? I do have one.
Right.
When a client comes to you, what are the things that they ask? Do they ask, I want an energy efficient building, or I want to save money during the operation? Are they aware of that at all?
It depends. Now, more and more, yes, but still is a small percentage of people. Usually clients want to have a building where at the minimum price for the quality they want. So this is the main focus. Then, depending on how clients are involved and aware of climate change, they actually, sure, they can have interest on sustainable aspects, but this interest goes less and less important if we're not able to conceive a cost-benefit solution. This is clear, 100% sure.